Everyone thought Sarah was the unstable one, the emotional wife who couldn't keep it together. What no one saw was the man behind the curtain, pulling strings so carefully that even her own children were taken from her hands. This isn't just a story about marriage. It's the story of how narcissistic abuse can break a person piece by piece, until the world believes the victim is the villain. Sarah met David on a rainy afternoon in a crowded bookstore. He was tall, confident, with a smile that lit up the room. He noticed the book in her hands, a parenting guide, and struck up a conversation as if it were fate. Within minutes, Sarah felt seen in a way she hadn't in years. David was everything she thought she wanted. Attentive, charming, intelligent. He opened doors, carried heavy bags, and showered her with compliments that made her feel like the most important woman in the world. He told her she was beautiful without makeup, brilliant without trying, and too precious to waste her time on people who didn't value her. It all sounded like love. It felt like safety. Her friends admired him. Her family adored him. "Sarah, you found a good one," they said. And she believed it. But even in those early days, the cracks were there, small, sharp comments hidden beneath his charm. The way he laughed when she mispronounced a word. The way he brushed off her opinions with a smile. The way he asked about her ex-husband but stored the details like ammunition. At first, it felt harmless. Like jokes. Like quirks. After all, everyone has flaws. Sarah didn't realize then, those weren't flaws. They were red flags. And one day they would be the very reasons her world collapsed. At first, David's concerns sounded like love. "I just worry about you," he would say when Sarah mentioned meeting her friends after work. "They don't really treat you with respect. You deserve better company." Or, "Why should you waste your time going to those family dinners? They've never supported you the way I do. I'm the one who really understands you." To Sarah it felt protective. Caring. Maybe he was right. Her friends had drifted, her family didn't always show up the way she hoped. David seemed to be the one constant, the one who always had her back. But little by little, Sarah's world began to shrink. Lunch dates with friends were replaced by cozy evenings with David. Phone calls with her sister grew less frequent, because David would sulk afterward. He would say things like, "Why do you even tell her everything? Isn't our marriage supposed to be private?" And Sarah, wanting peace, wanting love, agreed. At first. Then came the subtle corrections. "You're too soft with the kids," he would tell her when she soothed their daughter after a nightmare. "You need to toughen them up or they'll never survive in the real world." If she cooked a meal, he would smile but add, "It's good but not like how my mother used to make it." If she dressed up, he would grin and say, "You look amazing but maybe wear something less revealing next time. I don't want other men staring at what's mine." It was always said softly with affection in his eyes. Not commands, just advice. Not insults, just honesty. Sarah began to second-guess herself. Was she too soft with the children? Was her cooking not good enough? Was her dress too bold? Each small correction dug into her confidence like tiny needles. Nothing fatal on its own, but together, leaving her bleeding inside. And whenever she resisted, David had a way of turning it around. "You're so sensitive, Sarah. I didn't mean it like that. You always take things the wrong way. Can't you see I'm just trying to help you?" She would end up apologizing to him. Every single time. Soon she stopped sharing her feelings altogether. It was easier to nod, to smile, to pretend she agreed. Silence became her survival. And David? He looked like the perfect husband to everyone else. He went to parent-teacher conferences. He helped neighbors with their groceries. He charmed Sarah's family with his generosity, bringing gifts, making toasts, and calling himself the luckiest man alive. They adored him. They envied her. But behind closed doors, Sarah felt herself disappearing. And slowly, a new voice began whispering inside her head, David's voice. Questioning her worth. Questioning her memory. Questioning whether she was really good enough. What she didn't realize was that this wasn't protection. It wasn't love. It was isolation. It was control. And step by step, David was building a cage around her. One she couldn't see but one she would soon feel closing in. Arguments with David never ended the way arguments normally should. They didn't resolve, they didn't compromise, and they didn't fade. They bent. They twisted. They always came back to one conclusion. Sarah was wrong. It would start small. "You said you'd pick up the kids at 3, Sarah would remind him, standing by the door with her coat on. "No, you told me 4, David would reply, calm, steady, certain. "No. I'm sure I said 3. "I even texted you," Sarah insisted, fumbling through her phone. David would shake his head slowly, pity in his eyes. "You've been so stressed lately, Sarah. You probably typed the wrong time. Don't worry, I'll forgive you. Forgive her? She had been right. She was certain. But his tone, gentle, patronizing, made her hesitate. Maybe she had misremembered. Maybe she had been careless. Another time, Sarah confronted him after finding flirtatious messages on his phone. David, who is this woman? Why is she saying she misses you? He didn't yell. He didn't panic. He laughed. Are you serious? You're really going to accuse me after everything I do for this family? Sarah, you're paranoid. She's just a coworker. Look at you snooping through my phone. That's not healthy. That's not love. By the end of the argument, Sarah was the one apologizing. Apologizing for looking. Apologizing for doubting him. Apologizing for being paranoid. This was the cycle. Every single time. He erased her truth and replaced it with his. If she cried, he told her she was overreacting. If she raised her voice, he told her she was hysterical. If she forgot something, he said she was losing her mind. And slowly she began to believe him. Sarah started to question her memory. Did she really say 3 o'clock? Did she really see that message correctly? Did she exaggerate his words in her head? Nights became sleepless, filled with spiraling doubts. She replayed conversations in her mind, second-guessing every word. By morning she felt drained, guilty, and ashamed. And David, calm, composed David, always had the same reassuring smile. Don't worry, love. I know you've been struggling lately. But I'll take care of you. He wasn't taking care of her. He was dismantling her piece by piece, until even her own thoughts no longer belonged to her. But the worst part wasn't just the confusion. It was the audience. Because David had begun sharing his version of the story with others. He would casually mention to friends, Sarah's been a little forgetful lately. Stress, you know how it is. To her family, she gets worked up over small things. I'm doing my best to support her. To the kids, mommy's tired. She needs daddy to handle things. What looked like casual comments were seeds of doubt planted in everyone around them. Seeds that would grow into something devastating. And Sarah? She thought she was alone in her struggle, never realizing that David was already rewriting the story of their marriage. A story where he was the patient, loving husband, and she was the unstable, unreliable wife. By the time she caught on, the damage was already spreading. Sarah had always been steady. She was the kind of woman who kept calendars color-coded, bills paid on time, and the kids' lunches packed neatly every morning. But now, she barely recognized herself. She was tired all the time. Her thoughts scattered like papers in the wind. Nights stretched into restless hours of replaying every argument with David, every word she had second-guessed. She would wake up with headaches, dark circles beneath her eyes, and a heaviness in her chest she couldn't explain. It wasn't just exhaustion. It was doubt. It was fear. And David knew it. One evening, Sarah misplaced the car keys. She searched the counter, the couch cushions, the entryway table. Her hands shook as she pulled open drawers, feeling panic rise. Looking for these? David's voice was smooth as he dangled the keys in front of her, a smirk tugging at his lips. Where did you? I left them on the table. Sarah's voice cracked. No, sweetheart. You probably forgot. You've been so scatterbrained lately. He chuckled softly, the way someone might tease a child. You really should get more rest. People are starting to notice. Her stomach dropped. People? Who did he mean? What had he been saying about her? Later that week, she had what she could only describe as a breakdown. The children were bickering, the dinner was burning, and David came home with that smug half-smile that told her he'd been out too long, with someone else, doing God knows what. She snapped. Her voice rose higher than it ever had. She cried, she shouted, she begged him to tell the truth, to stop twisting her mind into knots. Her hands trembled as she clutched the edge of the counter, tears streaming down her face. David didn't yell back. He didn't look angry. He looked victorious. Calmly, he pulled out his phone and set it on the counter, camera pointed at her. This is what I mean, Sarah, he said softly, almost pitying. You're not well. Look at yourself. This isn't normal. And just like that, her private breaking point became his evidence. Later, Sarah would learn that David showed those clips to family members, to friends, even to a lawyer. See how unstable she is? I'm worried about her, and the children. It was the perfect setup. Every outburst he provoked, every tear he caused became part of the case he was building against her. A case she didn't even know existed yet. Sarah's confidence collapsed. Her voice grew smaller. Her laughter faded. She started to avoid mirrors because she couldn't face the hollow eyes staring back at her. Worst of all, she began to believe David's words. Maybe she was unstable. Maybe she was too emotional. Maybe she wasn't a good mother. And in that belief, David found his strongest weapon, because a woman who doubts herself will rarely fight back. And Sarah never imagined the word mother could be stripped from her. No matter how broken she felt, no matter how much David twisted her world, her children had always been her anchor. The one pure thing she could hold on to. Their little hands clutching hers. Their laughter echoing through the house. The bedtime whispers of, "I love you, Mommy." But slowly, almost imperceptibly, David began to sever even that bond. It started with whispers. "Mommy's just tired today," he'd tell them when Sarah was too exhausted to play. "Mommy forgets things sometimes, but Daddy will take care of it. Don't bother your mom, you know how sensitive she gets." At first the kids brushed it off. But over time the seeds took root. They began to look at Sarah differently. Questioning. Hesitant. When she tried to discipline them, David would step in. "Don't listen to her, she's overreacting." When she planned a family outing, David would cancel it last minute. "Mommy got the time wrong again." When she cried in her room, he would make sure the children saw her, shaking his head sadly. And then came the court papers. David claimed Sarah was emotionally unstable. He had proof. Videos of her breaking down, testimony from neighbors he charmed, even statements from her own family members. Family who, swayed by his charisma, believed his side of the story. Sarah walked into the courtroom with trembling hands, convinced that the truth would save her. She told her story as best as she could, voice cracking with desperation. But to the judge it didn't sound like truth. It sounded like hysteria. David, on the other hand, sat calm, collected, polished. He spoke gently with practiced sorrow. "I only want what's best for the children, Your Honor. I've done everything I can to support Sarah, but I worry about her mental state. I worry about the kids' safety." Every lie slid out of his mouth like silk. And the more Sarah cried, the more unstable she appeared. When the ruling came down, it felt like the air was sucked out of her lungs. Primary custody, awarded to David. Visitation for Sarah, limited, supervised. Her children, the very reason she had endured the storm for so long, were gone. That night, Sarah sat in the empty house, the silence so loud it roared in her ears. Their toys still scattered on the floor, their drawings still taped to the fridge, their absence like a gaping wound in her chest. She pressed her face into their pillows, inhaling the fading scent of her babies, and broke apart. Not the kind of cry that brings release, but the kind that hollows you out. And in that moment she realized, David hadn't just taken her marriage. He hadn't just taken her confidence. He had taken her children. Her identity. Her very reason for living. And worst of all, he had convinced the world that she was the one who deserved to lose them. The house felt like a tomb. Silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator and the creak of the old wooden floors beneath Sarah's feet. The walls, once painted with laughter and tiny handprints, now seemed to close in on her. The children's rooms were the hardest. Their toys sat untouched, their beds neatly made, their drawings still taped proudly to the walls. Sarah would sit in the doorway, clutching a forgotten stuffed animal, her tears soaking into its worn fur. She replayed every moment in her head. Every courtroom word. Every sideways glance from the judge. Every smug half-smile from David as he walked out of the courthouse holding victory in his hands. And the guilt. God, the guilt. Maybe David was right. Maybe she had overreacted too often. Maybe she had been too emotional, too tired, too broken. Maybe she really had failed as a mother. Her phone buzzed sometimes, but she rarely answered. Messages from friends went unread. Invitations from family were ignored. The truth was she didn't want to face anyone. She didn't want to see the pity in their eyes, or worse, the belief that David had been right all along. Nights were the worst. The bed felt too big without the warmth of her children climbing in after nightmares. The quiet was suffocating. Sleep wouldn't come, and when it did, it was filled with dreams of holding her kids again, only to wake with empty arms. Her body carried the weight of depression. Heavy limbs, constant headaches, a chest so tight it hurt to breathe. Meals went uneaten. Days blurred together. And David? He flourished. On social media, he posted pictures with the children. Smiling at soccer games, celebrating birthdays, posing with perfect family portraits. To the world, he was the doting father who had saved his kids from an unstable mother. And Sarah, reduced to whispers. She couldn't handle it. Poor woman, she lost everything. David was right, she was unstable. The narrative was complete. The lie had become truth. One evening, Sarah stared at herself in the mirror, hardly recognizing the hollow woman gazing back. Her once bright eyes were dim, her skin pale, her shoulders slumped. She whispered aloud, "Maybe I am crazy." That thought scared her more than anything. Because if she was crazy, then maybe David had been right all along. It was the lowest point of her life, stripped of her children, her dignity, and even her belief in her own mind. And yet, somewhere beneath the rubble, a tiny spark remained. Because broken as she was, Sarah was still breathing. And as long as she was breathing, her story wasn't over. The silence in the house was unbearable. Sarah used to think silence meant peace, a rare gift when you were a mother of 2 young children. But now silence was cruel. It wasn't peace. It was absence. It was loss. It was the sound of her children's laughter stolen from her, replaced by an emptiness that echoed through every room. She tried to fill it. She turned on the TV, left the radio running, opened the windows to hear the neighborhood kids playing outside. But no matter what she did, the silence crept back in, louder than any noise. Each morning she woke with a hollow pit in her chest. Some days she stayed in bed until the afternoon, staring at the ceiling, trying to summon the energy to move. Other days she shuffled aimlessly around the house, picking up toys that hadn't been touched in weeks, folding clothes that no one would wear. Her body reflected her despair. Weight slipped off her frame. Her hair lost its shine. Her face, once lively, now carried a constant strain, sunken eyes, pale skin, a permanent tremble in her lips. But worse than the physical toll was the war in her mind. David's voice haunted her even in his absence. "You're unstable. You can't take care of them. This is your fault." She tried to push the thoughts away, but they circled back, gnawing at her self-worth. She began to doubt her own memories. Had she really overreacted all those times? Had she imagined the manipulation? Had she been too weak to hold her family together? The cruelest trick of narcissistic abuse isn't just what they take from you, it's what they make you take from yourself. Sarah started to believe she was the problem. That she had broken her marriage. That she had failed as a mother. That she had deserved to lose her children. The outside world didn't help. Social media painted David as the perfect father. Smiling photos at soccer practice. Birthday cakes and family outings. Captions dripping with devotion, "Nothing matters more than being a dad." And people believed him. Friends she once trusted, neighbors she once confided in, even relatives who should have known her heart, they turned cold. They whispered about her behind closed doors. To them, Sarah was the unstable one. The mother who had lost control. Everywhere she turned, the story was already written. David the savior. Sarah the failure. Nights were the hardest. She lay in the dark, replaying moments she couldn't change. The day she screamed in the kitchen while David recorded her. The times she doubted herself instead of trusting her instincts. The red flags she saw but ignored because she loved him, because she wanted her children to grow up in a whole family. Sleep offered no escape. When it came, it brought cruel dreams. The kids running into her arms, calling her mommy with joy. Waking up was like losing them all over again. There were moments she questioned whether she could go on. Moments where the pain was so heavy, so endless, that she wondered what purpose her life had without her children. This was rock bottom. A place so dark that she feared she would never climb out. But even in that pit, something small flickered inside her. It wasn't hope yet. It wasn't strength. It was something quieter, a stubborn refusal to let David's version of her be the final word. Because though Sarah was broken, she was still alive. And as long as she was alive, there was still a chance to fight for the truth. The day Sarah finally got out of bed, it wasn't because she wanted to. It was because she had no choice. Her lawyer had called about paperwork. A reminder of court dates. More battles ahead. For a long time, Sarah had thought she was too broken to fight. But something about that phone call, the matter-of-fact tone, the sense that the world was moving on whether she did or not, pushed her to sit up, swing her legs over the edge of the mattress and stand. Her knees wobbled. Her body felt like it had aged decades. But she stood. It was the first step. In the weeks that followed, Sarah began forcing herself into routines. Simple things at first. Showering every morning. Eating a piece of toast even when her stomach churned. Opening the blinds to let light in even though the brightness hurt her eyes. Each small act felt like lifting a boulder. But little by little, those boulders added up. She also began journaling. At first, the pages were filled with tears, messy scrawls of guilt, anger, confusion. But the more she wrote, the more patterns emerged. She started to see the gaslighting, the manipulation, the lies for what they were. For the first time, she began separating David's voice from her own. "You're unstable," he had told her. But on the page, Sarah countered, "No. I was abused. It wasn't clarity all at once. Some days the self-doubt came roaring back. Some nights she still cried herself to sleep, clutching a stuffed animal that once belonged to her daughter. Healing wasn't a straight line. It zigzagged. It broke. It crawled. But with each day Sarah grew stronger. She found a support group for survivors of narcissistic abuse. Sitting in a circle of strangers, she trembled as she told her story. She expected judgment, pity, disbelief. But instead, she found nodding heads, knowing eyes, hands reaching out to hers. For the first time she realized, she wasn't alone. Other women had lived the same nightmare. Other women had doubted themselves, lost their children, been branded crazy by men who wore masks of perfection. And yet, here they were, breathing, surviving, healing. That gave Sarah something she hadn't felt in years, a spark of hope. She began therapy. At first, she was hesitant, afraid of being told once again that she was broken. But her therapist didn't see her as weak. She saw her as a survivor. Together, they unraveled the knots David had tied in her mind. Slowly, Sarah began to reclaim her truth. The truth that she had been a good mother. The truth that her pain was real. The truth that her worth had never depended on David's approval. And as her mind cleared, so did her purpose. She started recording her story, not for David, not for the courts, but for herself. Sometimes into a journal, sometimes into a microphone on her phone, sometimes just spoken aloud into the quiet rooms of her home. She told the truth again and again until the truth became louder than the lies. Sarah wasn't healed. Not yet. Maybe not ever in the way she once imagined. But she was rebuilding, brick by brick, word by word, day by day. And though her children were still with David, she clung to one belief with every ounce of strength left in her. One day they would grow up. One day they would see the truth for themselves. And when that day came, she wanted to be whole enough to embrace them. For a long time, Sarah thought survival was the best she could hope for. Waking up, breathing, making it through another day without collapsing, that felt like victory enough. But something shifted. It began in small, almost invisible ways. She noticed her hands no longer shook every time David's name appeared on her phone. She realized she could walk past the courthouse without her chest caving in. She laughed, genuinely laughed, at something silly on TV, and for the first time it didn't feel foreign. Sarah wasn't just surviving anymore. She was awakening. One morning, she sat at her kitchen table with her journal open in front of her. The pages were filled with pain, but they also told a story of resilience. She flipped through and a thought struck her. If I can survive this, maybe I can help someone else survive it too. That single thought lit a fire. She began sharing pieces of her story anonymously online. At first, it was just fragments, short posts about gaslighting, about the way narcissists twist reality, about the invisible scars of emotional abuse. She expected silence. But instead, responses flooded in. This is my life too. I thought I was alone until I read this. Thank you, you just put into words what I've been living. Sarah wept as she read the messages. For years she had been silenced, disbelieved, dismissed as unstable. Now strangers from around the world were validating her truth. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't alone. And she wasn't powerless anymore. The more she shared, the stronger her voice grew. She started a small support blog. Then a podcast. Sometimes she spoke shakily, her voice breaking as memories resurfaced. But people listened anyway. And the more they listened, the more Sarah realized something profound. Her story was no longer just about pain, it was about survival, strength, and awakening. David still tried to maintain control from afar. He sent smug emails, dropped subtle threats, continued curating his perfect father image on social media. But something was different now. His words no longer pierced her. His image no longer defined her. For the first time in years, Sarah felt free. Free to define herself not by what she lost, but by what she was becoming. The scars were still there, but they were no longer chains. They were reminders, proof of what she had endured and overcome. And though her children were still out of her reach, Sarah held on to hope. She believed that one day, when they were old enough to see beyond the mask David wore, they would come searching for answers. And when that day came, she wanted them to find a mother who had not only survived, but risen. The awakening wasn't a single moment. It was a journey. Some days she stumbled. Some nights she still cried. But every morning she woke up with a little more strength, a little more clarity, a little more light. Sarah had been broken. She had been silenced. She had been stripped of almost everything. But she was still here. And now she was unafraid to tell her story. Because if David's greatest weapon had been the lie that she was weak, Sarah's greatest victory was proving day by day that she was stronger than he ever imagined. Sarah knew her story wasn't just hers anymore. For years she had been trapped in silence, convinced no one would ever believe her. But as she began to share pieces of her journey, she realized how many others were living the same nightmare behind closed doors. Different faces, different names, but the same scars. And so, she began to speak not only for herself, but for them. Her message was simple yet powerful: pay attention to the red flags. Don't wait until it's too late. She remembered how charming David had been in the beginning. The way he showered her with compliments made her feel like the center of his universe. Love bombing, she now knew. The intoxicating trap. She remembered how the subtle digs started: you're too sensitive, you're imagining things. How she had brushed them off, convincing herself it wasn't serious. The early gaslighting which slowly eroded her reality. She remembered how the isolation crept in, how David had made sure her world revolved only around him. And how, when her world finally collapsed, he stepped back and told everyone else, "Look, she's crazy." And Sarah's warning to others was clear. Red flags don't wave like banners. They whisper. They hide in charm, in flattery, in small moments of doubt. They can look like love until it's too late. But her message wasn't just about warning signs. It was about survival. "If you've lived this," she said into her microphone one evening, her voice steady and strong, "you are not crazy. You are not weak. You are not alone. Narcissistic abuse doesn't just break your heart. It rewrites your mind. It convinces you that you are the problem. But you are not the problem. You are the survivor." She reminded them that healing is not linear. That there are days of strength and days of collapse. That recovery isn't about pretending the scars don't exist, but learning to live with them, and to use them as reminders of resilience. And for those still trapped in the cycle, Sarah's voice was a lifeline. You don't have to stay. You don't have to keep proving your worth to someone determined to devalue you. There is life on the other side. There is peace waiting for you even if you can't see it yet. Her children were still her greatest ache. She didn't pretend otherwise. She carried that loss every day, a wound that time alone couldn't heal. But even in that pain she found purpose. She wanted them to know someday that their mother had fought, that she had spoken the truth, that she had turned her suffering into strength. And she wanted every listener, every survivor watching her story on their screen, to take away one truth above all. You can lose almost everything and still rebuild. You can be broken and still rise. You can have your story stolen and still reclaim your voice. Sarah had been silenced once. But now her voice carried, not just for her, not just for her children, but for every survivor who needed to hear. You are not what they say you are. You are stronger than you know. And your story is not over. Years passed. The pain didn't vanish, but it changed shape. It no longer ruled Sarah's every thought. Instead, it lived quietly in the background, like an old scar that ached only when the weather shifted. Her children grew older. Though David still held custody, they began to ask questions. They noticed cracks in the perfect mask he wore. They saw his temper, his contradictions, the way he bent reality to suit himself. Slowly they started to see through him. And when they came to Sarah, curious, tentative, unsure of what to believe, she didn't overwhelm them with anger or accusations. She simply told them the truth. Patiently. Gently. Consistently. The truth had been her prison once. Now it was her freedom. In time, her children began spending more time with her. Not out of legal obligation but out of choice. They sought her warmth, her honesty, the safety they had once been taught to doubt. And Sarah welcomed them with open arms, no bitterness, no vengeance, just love. Meanwhile, Sarah's voice grew louder in the world beyond her family. Her blog had become a platform. Her podcast, once recorded in a shaky whisper, now reached thousands of listeners. Survivors wrote to her daily, telling her how her story had given them courage to leave, to heal, to rebuild. Sarah had become what she once desperately needed, proof that survival was possible. But she never painted her life as perfect. She was honest about the nights she still cried, the memories that still haunted her, the ache that never fully left. Because healing wasn't about erasing the past, it was about living fully in spite of it. And that was her legacy. Not that she had been a victim of narcissistic abuse. Not that she had lost everything once. But that she had found a way to rise again, and help others do the same. Sarah's story was no longer just the mask that stole her life. It was also the story of the woman who reclaimed it. And for every person listening, for every survivor who felt trapped and voiceless, Sarah left one final truth. You are not alone. What was stolen from you does not define you. You can rise again. And when you do, your story will become someone else's lifeline, just as mine has become yours. Sometimes victory doesn't look like fireworks. Sometimes it looks like peace. On a warm autumn morning, Sarah walked through her neighborhood with a cup of tea in her hand. The leaves crunched beneath her shoes, the air crisp but comforting. It wasn't a special day, no court hearings, no milestones, no battles to fight. Just a Tuesday. And yet, for Sarah, this was everything. Because for years she had lived in chaos. She had lived on edge, waiting for the next explosion, the next lie, the next smear campaign. She had lived in survival mode so long that she forgot what it felt like to breathe without fear. But today she was breathing. The silence in her home wasn't heavy anymore. It wasn't the silence of loneliness or manipulation. It was the silence of peace, the kind that let her hear her own thoughts again. Her children came by often now. Her daughter called her every evening, sometimes just to talk about nothing at all. Her son visited on weekends, always leaving with leftovers wrapped in foil. They didn't look at her with suspicion anymore. They looked at her with love. That was her quiet victory. David still existed, of course. People like him rarely fade completely. He still had his circle, still wore his mask, still told his stories. But he no longer defined her life. His shadow no longer darkened her doorway. He was a chapter, a painful one, yes, but only a chapter. Not the whole book. Sarah's new life was made up of small, beautiful things. Long walks. Laughter over coffee with friends. Quiet evenings curled up with a book. Moments she once thought she'd never have again. And she realized something. Survival had once been her only goal. But now she was living. Her quiet victory was not in proving David wrong, or winning back every piece of what she had lost. Her victory was in reclaiming herself. Her sanity. Her joy. Her freedom. For the first time in decades, Sarah's life belonged only to her. And as she looked out at the setting sun that evening, Sarah whispered to herself, words that weren't desperate or broken anymore, but steady, certain, full of gratitude. This is my life. And I am finally free.